Welcome to our deep dive, where emotions and perceptions and maybe even ESP all kind of come together. We've got a fascinating collection of lectures exploring how our feelings shape what we see and hear, how we decode each other's emotions, and even the possibility of sensing thoughts directly.
It really is intriguing how often we just kind of gloss over the impact our internal state has on our experience in the world. We're not just passively taking in information. Our brains are actively constructing our reality, and emotions play a huge role in that process.
Yeah, one of the lectures had this great story about a bus ride that really illustrated this point. It involved a simple "Life is good" t-shirt, but get this, two passengers saw it totally differently.
Ah, yes. The same image leading to two different interpretations.
Exactly.
One person who was feeling kind of grumpy actually saw the man on the shirt being chased by his dog. But someone else in a more positive mood saw it as like a joyful jog in the park.
So basically, their emotions created two different realities from the same image.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how often this is happening without us even knowing it.
All the time, probably. Right.
Absolutely. This really gets at this key concept of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Our brains tend to zero in on and interpret information in a way that just confirms our existing beliefs and our emotional states.
So even something as basic as a t-shirt design can be seen differently based on our mood.
Exactly.
And it's not just anecdotal either. There's research that backs this up. Studies have actually shown that seeing fearful faces increases our sensitivity to contrast, making us more likely to spot subtle details.
And that makes sense if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. If someone is expressing fear, it's a signal that, hey, there might be danger, and our brains are wired for survival.
So our emotions are fine-tuning our senses, making us more attuned to potential threats.
Right.
This also explains why heights seem so much scarier when we're afraid, or why a skateboard at the top of the hill makes the slope look way steeper than standing on a box at that same height.
Right.
Our brain is factoring in the potential danger, and that influences both our perception and how cautious we are.
Yes, exactly. Our internal state, especially fear or anxiety, can really change our spatial perception, making distances seem larger and slopes look more treacherous.
Okay, so we've talked about how emotions impact our own perceptions, but what about deciphering other people's thoughts and feelings? We all engage in some form of mind reading every day, don't we?
All the time. We do it constantly,
Yeah.
but not through some kind of, supernatural means. It's really about observing those subtle cues and drawing inferences based on patterns we've learned in our past experiences.
The lectures mention this cool carrot trick that demonstrates this. Can you walk us through it?
Okay, so think of a number between 1 and 10. Got it. Okay. Now double it, add 6. Divide by 2. Subtract your original number. What did you get?
3.
3.
Yeah, every time. It feels like magic.
It's not magic, though. It's just the structure of the problem itself. The steps are designed to lead to a specific outcome. And by understanding that, we can create the illusion of predicting thoughts.
So it's not mind reading, it's like leveraging patterns to create a wow moment.
Exactly. And while we might not have telepathic abilities, our brains are actually remarkably good at picking up on subtle cues, especially through eye gaze. Where we look reveals a lot about what we're paying attention to and even what our intentions might be. That's actually why pro poker players often wear sunglasses.
Ah, to hide their eyes.
Exactly. It's all about information control.
High stakes. Speaking of high stakes, the lectures also touched on lie detection and the use of polygraphs. Are those things foolproof?
They're not quite. Polygraphs measure physiological responses like heart rate and perspiration based on the idea that those things spike when someone's lying.
Right.
But those responses can actually be manipulated,
Really?
even with really simple techniques.
It's like the toe clenching trick that was mentioned. How does that even work?
So if you intentionally clench your toes during truthful answers and then relax them when you're lying, you can create this kind of confusing physiological pattern that makes those polygraph readings unreliable.
Wow. So it seems human lie detectors are still the most effective then.
It seems that way. The lectures talked about how Secret Service agents, for example, are masters at reading micro-expressions. Have you heard of those?
I have, but I don't really know what they are.
So micro-expressions are these very fleeting, involuntary facial movements that betray true emotions, even when someone is trying to hide them. They happen so quickly that most people don't even consciously notice them.
So they're like these tiny leaks of genuine emotion.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. It seems like we've uncovered some pretty remarkable ways our senses and perceptions work and how deeply they're intertwined with our emotions.
Yeah, we've just started to scratch the surface.
Speaking of fascinating ways our senses operate, the lectures also delved into synesthesia.
Yeah.
This is where things get really wild.
Right. Imagine experiencing numbers as colors or tasting sounds.
Whoa.
Might sound like science fiction, but research confirms that synesthesia is a real neurological experience.
That's wild. The lectures gave an example of a student who perceived the letter A as red. And it wasn't just like an association, they actually saw it that way.
Yeah, it's more than just a vivid imagination. Studies have shown that synesthetes actually perform faster in visual search tasks when the target aligns with their synesthetic experience. So, for example, if someone sees the number 5 as green, they'll spot a green 5, among other numbers, much faster than someone without synesthesia. Their brains process information differently at a very fundamental level.
Wow, that's incredible. It makes you wonder, why does this happen? Are there any leading theories about this?
The exact cause is still a mystery, but current theories suggest a link to strong early associations possibly formed during childhood. Those colorful alphabet toys. Maybe repeated exposure to letters and colors creates lasting neural connections that could lead to synesthesia.
Interesting. It's funny because even those of us who don't experience full-blown synesthesia often use synesthesia-like language. Think about phrases like sharp cheese or an icy stare.
That's true. We all tap into this kind of blending of senses in our language, which suggests that this interconnectedness might be more common than we realize, just expressed in different ways.
It's like synesthesia offers a peek into the brain's incredible flexibility and interconnectedness, and it challenges our assumptions about how we experience the world. It makes you wonder what other hidden connections are our brains making that we're not even aware of. But now let's venture into truly mind-boggling territory, the possibility of ESP.
Now, that's where things get really interesting and potentially controversial.
We've explored how emotions color our perceptions and how we decipher the thoughts and feelings of others through subtle cues. But could there be something more? Could thought transmission actually be possible?
It's a question that's fascinated and perplexed scientists for decades.
Yeah.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the research on ESP has been met with a lot of skepticism, often for good reason. Early studies were often flawed, and results were hard to replicate.
Right. But the lectures did mention research by Daryl Bem that seemed to use a more rigorous approach. He conducted studies that suggested precognition, the ability to perceive future events, might actually be real. How do you even test for something like that?
Bem's research was really innovative in that he took established psychological paradigms and flipped them to test for precognition. In one study, he found that participants showed a slight but statistically significant tendency to correctly guess the location of an image before it was randomly generated by a computer.
So they were picking up on information that didn't yet exist.
Yeah,
That's intriguing, but it raises a lot of questions.
absolutely. And while Bem's findings are definitely thought-provoking, it's crucial to approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism. Further research is needed to determine if these effects are genuine and replicable.
It's groundbreaking research, but as you said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What would convince you as a scientist that ESP is a real phenomenon?
For me, it would require a convergence of evidence from multiple independent researchers using diverse methodologies, all pointing to the same conclusion. We need to see robust, replicable results that can't be explained by any known physical or psychological mechanisms.
So the jury's still out on ESP, but it's certainly a topic that sparks curiosity and makes us question the limits of our understanding. Even if it turns out not to be real, exploring these questions pushes us to think critically and challenge our assumptions about the world.
I completely agree. This deep dive has already taken us on quite a journey through the intricacies of perception, emotion, and the human mind.
It really has. We've explored how our emotions act as filters, shaping how we interpret information and influencing our perception of the world around us. We've delved into the subtle ways we read each other's minds through body language and microexpressions, and we've even ventured into the uncharted territory of synesthesia and ESP, pushing the boundaries of what we thought we knew about perception and consciousness.
What are your thoughts so far? What stood out to you from this exploration?
What strikes me is how much we just take for granted about our senses. We effortlessly navigate a world overflowing with information, filtering, interpreting, and making sense of it all without consciously realizing the complexity of the processes involved.
Our brains are constantly at work constructing our reality based on a blend of sensory input, past experiences, and current emotional states. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving process.
This deep dive is reminding us that our perceptions aren't always objective reflections of reality, but rather subjective interpretations influenced by a whole bunch of factors.
It really raises a crucial question. How can we become more aware of these influences, both in ourselves and in others?
That's a question we'll continue to explore in part 2 of our deep dives. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the implications of these insights and uncover even more about the fascinating interplay of perception, emotion, and the mysteries of the mind.
It's amazing how much this deep dive is making us re-examine something so basic to our experience,
Yeah.
our senses.
Yeah.
We just seamlessly navigate a world that's full of information, and we're constantly filtering and interpreting and making sense of it all. And yet we rarely stop to think about how complex those processes really are.
It really is a testament to the power of the brain and how adaptable it is. We've uncovered just how much our internal state, especially our emotions, can influence how we perceive things,
Yeah.
and we're often completely unaware of it.
All right. And that brings up a really important question about how we can become more aware of those influences, both in ourselves and when we're trying to understand other people.
Exactly. If our perceptions aren't always objective reflections of reality, but are kind of subjective interpretations colored by our emotions, our experiences, and our biases, how can we strive for a more balanced and informed view of the world?
One key takeaway is that we have to recognize our own biases. We all have them. It's just part of being human.
Hmm.
But by becoming aware of our preconceived notions and those emotional tendencies, we can start to question our own assumptions and interpretations.
Yeah, the Life is Good t-shirt is a perfect example. Two people looking at the exact same image saw completely different things based on their mood. It really makes you wonder how often our emotions are clouding our judgment without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. It really highlights that powerful pull of confirmation bias, our tendency to gravitate towards and interpret information that just confirms what we already believe.
So how do we fight that? How do we become more aware of those biases and prevent them from distorting our perceptions?
One strategy is to actively seek out different perspectives. Instead of surrounding ourselves with people who just agree with us, we should be engaging in conversations with people who hold different opinions. Challenge your own assumptions by considering other points of view.
It's like stepping outside our echo chambers and exposing ourselves to a wider range of ideas and experiences.
Exactly. Another really important step is to cultivate mindfulness. It's that practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. And by becoming more aware of our thoughts and emotions, even our bodily sensations, we can start to see how they influence our perceptions and reactions.
So instead of getting swept away by our emotions, we can learn to observe them with a sense of detachment, which allows for a more balanced perspective.
Right? Mindfulness helps us create space between our emotions and our actions, and that gives us more control over how we respond to situations.
It's like hitting the pause button on our automatic reactions and giving ourselves the time to process information more objectively.
Exactly. It's
Mhm.
about becoming more conscious of the things that shape our perceptions and learning to navigate the world with more awareness and more carefully.
This brings us back to mind reading. We've talked about how we're constantly interpreting these subtle cues to try to figure out what other people are thinking and feeling. But how much can we trust those interpretations? Can we ever really know what someone else is thinking or feeling?
That's a tough question. And the answer is not with absolute certainty. We can definitely get better at reading body language and facial expressions and those other nonverbal cues, but they're not always foolproof indicators of someone's internal state.
We talked about microexpressions before, those quick, involuntary movements that can betray true emotions. But are they always reliable? Can they be misinterpreted or even faked?
Microexpressions are fascinating, but even the experts admit they have limitations. They can be really hard to spot and interpret correctly, especially when you're interacting with someone in real time. And cultural differences can come into play too, because certain expressions can have different meanings in different cultures.
So even though microexpressions can offer valuable insights, it's important to consider the context and other factors before jumping to conclusions about someone's emotions.
Absolutely. It's about combining what we observe in those nonverbal cues with what we know about the person, the situation, and the cultural norms.
It sounds like becoming a skilled mind reader is as much about understanding the limits of our interpretations as it is about observing those subtle cues. It's this ongoing process of learning, observing, and refining our understanding.
Exactly. And we have to remember that even the best mind readers can be wrong. We're all prone to biases and misinterpretations. Humility is really important.
Humility and the willingness to admit that we don't have all the answers. Which leads us to maybe the most humbling question of all. Are there things about reality that we simply can't perceive with our current senses and understanding? Could there be phenomena beyond our grasp like ESP?
That's a question that has intrigued philosophers and scientists for centuries. We've come a long way in terms of our scientific knowledge, but there are still mysteries out there that we can't explain. And ESP continues to fascinate us and challenge our conventional understanding of perception and consciousness.
Earlier, we discussed Daryl Bem's research, which suggested that precognition might be a real thing. And while more research is definitely needed to confirm those findings, it opens up some really interesting questions about the nature of time and consciousness.
It reminds us that there's still so much we don't know, and that our current understanding of the universe might be incomplete.
Maybe the most valuable takeaway from this deep dive, even more so than the specific details about perception and EST, is that we need to stay open to new possibilities, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the mystery of the unknown.
I totally agree. The more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to discover. And that's what makes this whole journey so exciting. It's kind of wild to think, after all this, we've still only just skimmed the surface of how our minds really work.
Right. Our deep dive into, perception, emotions, and even that possibility of ESP has definitely shown just how complex the human mind is. There's still so much to learn about how we experience the world and how our brains create our reality.
For sure.
So after all of this, how do you see the world differently now? Like, what's changed for you?
I think for me, it's just this greater awareness of how subjective perception actually is. We often assume everyone's seeing and hearing things the same way,
Hmm.
but this deep dive has really shown how much our individual viewpoints can actually differ.
It's like a good reminder that we each walk around with our own unique internal filter shaped by our emotions, our experiences, and even our biology.
Oh, absolutely. And this deep dive has given us all these new tools to navigate that complexity.
Yeah.
We've gained insights into the subtle ways we communicate through body language and those micro expressions. And we've seen how fears and anxieties can actually warp our perceptions. And we've witnessed the sheer adaptability of the brain.
It's like we've upgraded our perception software.
Exactly.
We can be more mindful of our biases, more in tune with what others are communicating, and more open to all the things we still don't know.
Right on. This deep dive hasn't just given us these fascinating insights, but it's also sparked this sense of wonder and curiosity about the mysteries of the mind. What new questions or areas of exploration have come up for you?
I'm really fascinated by the idea that our understanding of reality might be far from complete. Like exploring synesthesia, for example, challenged those assumptions I had about how rigidly defined our senses actually are. And that possibility of ESP, while it still needs more research, pushes us to consider that maybe there are dimensions of perception beyond what we currently grasp.
Yeah, those are excellent points. It really highlights how important it is to stay open to new possibilities, even the ones that challenge our current understanding.
It's been an amazing journey, and it leaves us with this feeling of awe and humility, awe at the complexity and wonder of the human mind and humility in recognizing that there's still so much we don't understand.
Well said.
We've learned a lot about how emotions shape our perceptions, how we interpret the thoughts and feelings of others, and we even got a glimpse into that intriguing realm of ESP.
It's been quite a ride.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners take away from this whole exploration?
I'd encourage everyone to keep going with this journey of discovery. Question your assumptions. Be curious and stay open to new perspectives. The human mind is vast and fascinating, and there's always more to explore.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into emotion, perception, and the mysteries of the mind. We hope you'll keep exploring, questioning, and discovering all the amazing things that are both within us and around us.